You're watching Headlines today. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The verdict in the IPL betting and fixing case is out. The Apex Court has made it clear that Gurunath Meiyappan and Raj Kundra were team officials and both of them were involved in betting during IPL 2013. In fact, the Supreme Court has said that the BCCI is performing a public function and is open to judicial review. In its 130-page verdict, the BCCI's functions are amenable to Article 226 is what the Supreme Court says. Shivani Gupta is now joining us from outside the Supreme Court. Vinay Tiwari and Boria Majumdar are also with us. Let me first get in a word from Shivani. Shivani, any more information trickling in at this moment? We understand it's a long order over there, 130-page verdict.
Yes, about 130 to 150 pages is what we heard. The order is being read out. The important flashes that we've already received information is about the public function of the body like BCCI. That in itself, Maha, is extremely huge for Indian cricket because whenever it is faced with a problem, the BCCI has used its private body status as one of the excuses to not, be answerable to the common public at large. Like, for example, coming under the RTI. And even in this case, when the Supreme Court had asked the BCCI about forming an outside panel, the BCCI said its autonomy is at stake. And the BCCI has repeatedly clarified its private body status. But now for the Supreme Court in this order to say that the BCCI disperses public function, which was one of the things that the petitioners in this case had argued extremely strongly during the hearings, in itself a massive verdict for the BCCI, because that could change how things move on from here as well. But in this case, particular to this case, what is very important is that they've established two things, that Gurunath Meiyappan and Raj Kundra were team officials and that they were involved in betting. That brings clause 11.3 into direct impact. So far, the BCCI has been running away from taking any action against the franchises despite this clause in the IPL agreement. Now they will have to take some action at least if the court asks them. But it remains to be seen how that action will be taken if Srinivasan continues to be the BCCI head.
Boria, does it directly mean that these two franchises should now be terminated?
No, you can't say that. I mean, 11.3 says they can be disqualified. So it is now upon the Supreme Court to decide whether it takes the action itself, or what is more probable is they will ask the BCCI to take action against these two franchises, Rajasthan Royals and Chennai Super Kings. You also have to keep in mind, Maha, that a lot of players are involved. Perhaps 50-60 players' fates will be involved if these two franchises are disqualified. So is it a disqualification? Is it suspension? Is it penalty? Is it cash penalty? Is it docking of points? There will be multiple scenarios. Will the court leave it to the board, or will it decide itself, is question number one. If it leaves it to the BCCI to go and take action because of Gurunath and Raj Kundra, as Shivani rightly said, will it be a BCCI headed by Srinivasan that is allowed to take action against his own son-in-law? Is that plausible? Will that cut the ice with the Supreme Court? So while disqualification is a possibility, what is more important is who takes action, what does the court decide, and if the board is allowed to take action or asked to take action, will it be a BCCI with Srinivasan as its boss?
Vinay, is it a big blow to the BCCI, the fact that the Supreme Court says it's a public body, it's performing a public function because it selects Team India? That's something they've been running away from for a very long time.
Yes, and I think three things, as far as whatever details we have of the court order so far, there are three things that are very clear now legally. The moment the Supreme Court of India says that two individuals who were named in an inquiry committee are involved in a particular crime, it impacts the investigation that are already on by two police forces in India. Jaipur police is investigating the case against Raj Kundra, and Delhi police investigating the case as well when Srishant was arrested. The Mumbai crime branch has already once arrested Meiyappan for his alleged links with Bindu Dara Singh. So the outcome of those two cases certainly get impacted by what the Supreme Court today has said in its order. That's part one. Part two, the Supreme Court has now settled this debate forever. And remember, this issue has come up several times, including in courts, where BCCI has even gone to the extent of asking for entertainment tax exemptions in courts.
Absolutely.
On the grounds that they are not a public body and that they are a private entity. which sometimes was granted by certain state governments. So today they've settled that debate, that because they're involved in a game which is public, because they represent the team India as they call it, they are in public life. So, which means all the sections of law, which includes things like criminal breach of trust or cheating or even other acts under the IPC, can now be applied in a further criminal probe. What I think we need to wait and see is whether the court has said anything on any further criminal investigation that needs to be launched or needs to be initiated in this case.
In fact, there are some more bits of information that are coming in at the moment. First of all, the Supreme Court has apparently said something on N Srinivasan, that things cannot be established on the basis of suspicion. Let's try and get more clarity from Shivani Gupta. Shivani, can you help us understand what exactly has the Supreme Court said on N Srinivasan?
Well, we are still awaiting more information on what the court has said on N Srinivasan per se. The order is being read out right now, Maha, and it could entail a lot. You know, one or two lines might not make the entire picture very clear. So we'll have to wait till we get a substantive part of what the court is saying on N Srinivasan. Of course, he's the man who's at the center of it all, and it's his conflict of interest that has brought the BCCI to this juncture today, because he has very, very adamantly refused to accept any conflict of interest, and the other charge on him has been to cover up his son-in-law Gurunath Meiyappan's role, because remember, he's on record to say that Gurunath Meiyappan was just a cricket enthusiast, while the Mudgal panel found him to be a team official and a deemed team owner. So his role in all of this is extremely crucial. First question on everyone's mind, of course, is whether he'll be allowed to participate in the BCCI elections, which have been delayed for as long as over 3 months now. But we are awaiting more details on N Srinivasan.
Boria, also the Supreme Court has said that Raj Kundra was heard by the Mudgal committee, so he can't complain that he was not heard. Has Raj Kundra been trying to hide behind that fact?
You know, Raj Kundra, by saying 1 month back that he is happy to give up his stake in Rajasthan Royals, everybody thought, or everybody interpreted that as an attempt to try and, you know, sort of get away from this and try and save the franchise. But now, after this Supreme Court verdict that Raj Kundra and Gurunath Meiyappan were involved in betting, I don't see them running away at all. I think it's a closed chapter. Now, betting is an offense. How do you interpret it? Different. How will the BCCI interpret? What impact will that have upon the two teams, CSK and Rajasthan Royals? That is a different matter altogether. But there will be penalty. Some shape or form it impacts the Indian Premier League and these two franchises. I think Mr. Srinivasan has been cleared of cover-up charges, but while that comes as a relief, the fact that BCCI has been held as a public body disbursing public functions also means, as the head of that public body, Mr. Srinivasan cannot sort of give up responsibility for the betting issues. So yes, you know, this is a very complex situation. Ask Vinay more legally, what does that mean as the head of the public body for Mr. Srinivasan?
Vinay, we'll quickly ask you one question. Where does the case go from here on, specifically for Raj Kundra, since we are discussing him at the moment?
See, there are two things, Maha. I think what we still haven't reached the last paragraph of the judgment. I think once we read that, we'll have to find whether the court has issued any specific directions or they've made any observations that have a relevance to this investigation. However, there are two criminal investigations already pending. The Mumbai Crime Branch case is at an advanced stage. The charge sheet level has already been reached. Same is the logic in the Delhi police case. What it does mean is that the lower court, which is hearing the arguments right now from the prosecution, their judgment or decisions on what evidence that's being produced in a court certainly gets impacted by what the Supreme Court is saying. It certainly weakens the arguments of both these accused persons currently on denying or defying certain aspects about not being involved in this case.
All right, we're getting some breaking news. This is, of course, coming in from the Supreme Court. It appears that the Supreme Court has given a clean chit to N Srinivasan on the issue of cover-up allegations. The Supreme Court has clearly said that things cannot be established on the basis of mere suspicion. Srinivasan was alleged of a cover-up of his son-in-law, Gurunath Meiyappan, who he said was only a cricket enthusiast and not a CSK team official. Meiyappan, though, was proven to be a team official by the Mudgal report itself. Shivani, coming back to you now, at least one thing that the Supreme Court has given some sort of a relief to N Srinivasan is over the fact that there was any cover-up attempt by him.
Yes, Maha, I was mentioning just this point when you last came to me, because that was amongst two of the most graver issues against N Srinivasan, one of conflict of interest and what happens to his position, and the other about his testimony, both in public and in front of Mudgal panel, where he said Gurunath Meiyappan is not a team official, he's a cricket enthusiast. So right now this seems quite conflicting, because on one hand the order does say that Gurunath Meiyappan is a team official, but it goes on to say that so far they cannot establish that there was a cover-up, even if he had said that he is a cricket enthusiast and not a team official. So in that regard, definitely a relief for N Srinivasan. What he will be more interested to know, though, whether he can fight the next elections or not. And if you go by what the Supreme Court has already said, or what we know already about it performing a public function, then it could be not very good news for him on that regard at least.
But Boria, as Shivani is pointing out over there, that it seems like a bit of a contradiction here. If Gurunath Meiyappan was indeed an official of the CSK and not merely an enthusiast, then how does that suspicion not go upon N Srinivasan that he was trying to hide things by saying that he was a mere enthusiast?
Supreme Court is saying it cannot be established, Maha. There is a question of evidence. Unless you have concrete evidence of cover-up, you cannot say somebody has just said he's an enthusiast means he's covering up. This is a case of evidence. So the Supreme Court will go by evidence. And as Shivani said, I mean, yes, Mr. Srinivasan is on record in a press conference saying he's an enthusiast. But the fact that Gurunath has been established as team principal proves two things. One, Chennai Super Kings is in jeopardy. Whether it's suspended, disqualified, penalized, punished, I don't know, but some shape or form punishment will have to be given. Two, the point that Shivani was making about public functions. Now, as the head of a public body, if betting was going on, under the aegis of the public body, IPL comes under the BCCI, Mr. Srinivasan will have to take responsibility. Even if he was not involved in cover-up, he has to take responsibility under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Make no mistake about it. Let's wait for the final order to be read. But just because he said he's an enthusiast, you can't say that, there is a contradiction. Yes, it's a relief, but there is a lot coming out. And what I'm understanding, Chennai and Rajasthan are in real mess here. They will have to be penalized. In what shape or form, we've got to wait and see.
But it's quite a wrap for the BCCI, with the Supreme Court clearly saying that the BCCI is definitely not above law here. Vinay, take us through Gurunath Meiyappan's case specifically, and where does it head from here on?
Before I do that, Maha, I just wanted to add to the last question that you asked. I think the question, what you asked, Boria, has been answered by the Supreme Court, and which is very clear. Under the law, you cannot prosecute somebody merely on the grounds of suspicion, and that is something they've laid down in black and white. However much we may believe that he could not have not known what was going on, the only fact that we must remember in law is that plausibility is not culpability. So while it may have been plausible, and I think Boria is right that entirely, he being the captain of the ship, he should have known what's going on. The person is the son-in-law, so obviously he has more reasons to know about that. But the evidence in the court of law is the only thing that matters. And I think the Supreme Court has now very clearly said that they've not found evidence that he was trying to meddle with it. They have also added one more thing, which has come as an update, that when the High Court panel was appointed to inquire into this, the Supreme Court says that Srinivasan did not interfere with that. So they have found merit in the argument that this panel held an inquiry which was free and fair. And they were referring to, of course, the Mudgal panel. Insofar as the other question about criminality is concerned, as I said earlier, the important point is that the two criminal investigations, the outcome of those investigations and the police's charge sheets, the police's allegations certainly get a little bit of a boost, because now the Supreme Court does believe that there is enough evidence to suggest that there was betting involved in these two individuals' cases.
Boria, has the Supreme Court in some way given a lifeline perhaps to N Srinivasan here by saying, or rather exonerating him of a cover-up?
See, as I said, without evidence you cannot implicate anybody, and the Supreme Court has found no evidence to say there was cover-up. But wait for the rest of the order, because it's two different parts. Let's not mix this. While he has not meddled in the Mudgal Commission's inquiry, that is the cover-up part. At the same time, did Mr. Srinivasan, or was Mr. Srinivasan in the wrong as the head of a public body disbursing public functions for not taking actions against betting? That has nothing to do with the Mudgal panel. That has nothing to do with cover-up charges. Cover-up was restricted to the Mudgal panel. Was he trying to cover up and stopping the inquiry of the Mudgal panel. Supreme Court says no, and there is an exoneration. But when betting was taking place, Gurunath and Kundra were betting. As the head of the public body, did he or is he responsible to take action against them, or has he not taken action against them? And there the Prevention of Corruption Act becomes relevant. That is where the public body, public function comes into play. So there are two different things going on here.
Right.
You have to wait and see for the rest of the order to understand the fate of Mr. Srinivasan.
Boria, why I was asking you that question and whether the Supreme Court has given him a lifeline is because so far we've seen him brazening it out really. When there were questions, when he was being hounded by the media, he seemed to have stood his ground. He didn't budge from his position. In that scenario, as he seeks a re-election to the BCCI, will this come as some sort of boost to him, perhaps?
You've got to wait for the order, because unless the entire order is read out, you will not know whether I'm sure the Supreme Court will pronounce something on whether he is eligible to contest or not. And he's brazened it out because he believes he's innocent, and everybody has an entitlement to believe they are innocent. Mr. Srinivasan does as well. But it is now upon the Supreme Court. It is upon the Supreme Court to tell us that if this conflict of interest issue is deep enough to understand that Mr. Srinivasan is not capable of taking over as the head of the BCCI again. Because I'm asking you two questions. One, if you have to take action against CSK, now that Gurunath is team principal and he was betting, who takes action? Is Mr. Srinivasan as the head of the BCCI in a position to take that action? Is it good enough? Or is there a case of conflict of interest? Because it's his son-in-law who is directly involved. Question number two. If it's a public body disbursing public functions and he has not been able to do that justice, do that function justice of stopping betting from happening in the Indian Premier League, will he be pulled up for that? And will the Supreme Court say that, look, you have not been able to disburse your public function properly, so perhaps you are not eligible to contest. So we cannot at this point in time conjecture, and I'm not willing to speculate at all on a Supreme Court verdict. You've got to wait and see for the rest of the order to figure out if Mr. Srinivasan is given a lifeline or is it a bad order for him.
All right, let me go back to Shivani for any more details that are coming in. Shivani, what are you hearing from inside the Supreme Court at the moment?
Maha, the latest update that we are getting, and this could be extremely important, although this is just one line that we are hearing right now out of the order. What we're hearing is that the Supreme Court has upheld the Mumbai High Court decision that Srinivasan could own CSK. Now, in itself, if you just go by this line, it seems that it could be a rest to the conflict of interest entire charge. But this could be just one line in the entire order, and there could be more coming out of it. Remember, the PIL, the petitioner in this case, Aditya Verma, had filed a PIL in Mumbai High Court earlier as well on the conflict of interest charge, and that the Mumbai High Court had dismissed that PIL, saying that the amendment is fine and the BCCI officials can own commercial interest in tournaments like the IPL. So the Supreme Court, what we're hearing just now, has said that it upholds the order of the High Court in Mumbai that Srinivasan can own CSKs. Now, what that means and what followed from here, we don't know quite yet clearly. So I will not like to speculate on that. But this is going to be extremely crucial because this is at the center. Him owning CSK is at the center of the entire conflict of interest charge, which directly impacts his position in the BCCI.
All right, Shivani, getting us that bit of breaking news over there. The Supreme Court has upheld the Bombay High Court order saying that Srinivasan could own CSK. What it really means, we'll take a look at that.